Mblex Study Buddy. I very much so appreciate everyone's feedback, all of the messages that I got. You guys are amazing. I am so glad that this is going to work out a little bit anyway. So this is my first video, and this is on client assessment, since it accounts for 17% of the test. It's client assessment, reassessment, and treatment planning. You've got organization of massage bodywork session. You have client consultation and evaluation, which is part of verbal intake and a health history form. You have written data collection, which is SOAP notes. Visual assessment, which is you're looking at the general posture. Palpation assessment, range of motion assessment, clinical reasoning, and this includes the ability to rule out contraindications, client treatment goal settings, and evaluation of response to a previous treatment, see if it worked out well for them, and formulation of treatment strategy. I have looked into my Mblex book, and I found a very short section on assessment. So I'm not really sure why there's not a whole lot of information in the Mblex book for assessment, but we're going to get into depth with that. I am on page 9, down at the bottom on my Mblex book. If you want to grab that, you can pause the video and go grab the book so that you can be with me while I read out of this. This says assessments are a vital component of any massage treatment. Assessments are evaluations of the client primarily done before a massage, but the therapist is constantly assessing even during and after a treatment. Assessments have many different uses. From determining any contraindications the client may have to tailoring the massage session specifically for that client and what they need. An example would be if a client complains of low back pain, and the therapist could do a visual assessment, range of motion, exercises, and palpation to determine what the possible cause of the low back pain could be. Then, after the assessment is complete, the therapist may tailor the session to work specifically on the areas of concern, possibly the hamstrings, quadratus lumborum, the psoas major, or the rectus femoris. Assessments may be performed in many different ways. Listening to the client and their complaints is the most effective way to determine issues the client may be experiencing. Visual assessment may be performed by focusing on alignment of specific bony landmarks to determine areas of concern. Some of these areas to compare bilaterally include the ears, possible neck tension, acromion process, shoulder, back, and chest tension, iliac crest, back, hip, and thigh tension, anterior, superior iliac spines, back, hip, and thigh tensions, and head of the fibulae, back, hip, and thigh tensions. Gait analysis may help determine hypertonic muscles unilaterally and injuries. Palpation is useful in feeling for adhesions or restrictions in muscles, localized ischemia, and inflammation. And intake forms are extremely helpful in determining contraindications via medical history, medications, any hobbies or jobs that may lead us to issues physically or mentally. An example could be a hobby of gardening, which may strain the back or hamstrings. This is all I have as far as client assessment in the Mblex book. If you find another page that reflects contraindications or client assessment and planning, please do let me know in the comments. But for now, because I'm not prepared for that, I'm going to move on to my own personal school books. I am in Basic Clinical Massage Therapy. I'm in this book. If you want to pause it, I don't know if you have it or not. If you don't, I'm going to read from it. As far as client history is concerned, I have, let's see, I think there's a few pages, and there's an information form, and you can do whole body assessments, informal observations, and it also gets into some photos, and I'll show you these photos, and you can pause again, all that. So here we go. Designing a form for client information. Practitioners usually need to gather certain information for business purposes, such as the client's name, address, phone number, and so on. This information is easily acquired by having clients fill out a form in the initial visit, and it can also be helpful to use the same form to gather information about the client's circumstances and history. The form can serve as a starting point for gathering more information in the history interview. In designing a form, think about what information is best obtained in writing and what information requires a more personal, in-depth exploration. Personal data, family or information, occupation, and names of primary health practitioners or current specialists are best required on a form. These items are fairly easy to decide on. It is more difficult to decide, however, what to ask about health history on a form. On one hand, it is best not to leave all health history to the interview because it's too easy to digress and overlook important issues. On the other hand, an overly lengthy and complicated history questionnaire may seem tedious and irrelevant. The object is to compose a form that is succinct yet accounts for all possibilities. Or most possibilities, sorry. In addition to the form itself, clients may be given a draw of human form on which they can mark areas where they are feeling pain and have felt pain recently. On the following sample form, this information is sought both in words on the form itself and in the accompanying figures. This duplication serves as a double check to make sure all the possibilities are covered. Remember, the clients have their own points of view. They may consider the information irrelevant that we see as important and not think to mention it. It is our job to collect all of the data that we need for our purposes while clarifying the relevance of this data to the client. It is very important. You definitely do want to do that. Here is the information form that they have. You can pause it and all that fun stuff. If you need to, you can write down what's on there. And then we also have a cool little photo where you can do this. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that well. Okay, there's that form. And people can mark what areas they're experiencing pain at. There's even a right and left foot. Isn't that nice? Through conducting the interview, although the primary purpose of the history interview is to gather information and establish rapport, it is also a good time to begin educating your client. For example, clients with possible work-related problems may need to consider ergonomics, repetitive motions, and other problems such as holding the telephone with their shoulders or working at a poorly set up computer station. Some people undertake exercise programs without proper advice. The initial interviews provides an opportunity to introduce these issues. Okay, so I'm going to pause right there actually, because there is something called the Alexander technique that I learned in school, and there was a cool little video on YouTube about it. And what it is proper posture. For people who are constantly sitting at a desk and they're constantly working on their computers, it is correct. You want to have your feet flat on the floor. You want to make sure the chair is adjusted for the length of the knee to the bottom of the foot. You want to make sure that the elbows are sitting at the side and they're straight down, and that the desk is straight out in front of their hands. And you also want to make sure that the screen is at eye level. If it's down or if it's way far up, then you can see that their head is constantly doing different movements. So a screen at eye level is going to be the best ergonomic solution for chronic pain, people having to look down or look up. Also, looking to the side. Some people have multiple screens. I actually had to deal with that when I worked in the insurance industry for a short period of time. I had multiple screens that I was working on at the same time, so I had to reassess how I was doing everything, and I had to put my laptop up on something taller, and I had to lower my other screen so that I wasn't doing like a weird thing with my head all day. And also I had to do a good chair. I had to make sure that everything was, my feet were flat on the floor, straight out in front of me, that everything worked out. My elbows were able to relax comfortably by my sides, and that my hands were able to hit my keyboard without having to stretch or extend or anything of that nature. It needed to be right there in front of me, so I also had to have a little drawer that pulled out my little keyboard. So I spent probably a good hour and a half working on that and getting that everything situated so that it was good for me, and so that I wasn't having repetitive wear and tear on my own body while I was at work. And I cannot tell you how grateful my other coworkers were whenever I explained what I was doing and how it worked, and helped them get their setups in a much better position so that they can continue working without having a lot of residual wear and tear on their feet. So I just thought that was a neat little thing to share with you. There is a cool little video about it on YouTube. You can look it up. It's called the Alexander Technique. Okay, moving on. Sorry, had to share that with you. Okay, so during the interview, you may find yourself thinking out loud. That is, sharing your thoughts with the client as an interview progresses, including clients as you process their information, and may encourage them to think about their muscular system in a new way. It also builds a team approach to therapy. Like other aspects of assessment process, the interview has a dual purpose, both holistic and reductionistic. On one hand, you are seeking to build a broad picture of the client and the circumstances in his or her life in order to determine what may be causing the problems and what kinds of solutions may be most effective. On the other hand, you may remain alert to clues to the cause of the specific complaint. In some cases, the injury may have occurred at a specific time when performing a precise exercise. Like, I lunged after the ball and felt a sharp pain in my groin. Most of the time, however, the onset and origin of the presenting problem will be much more vague and will require some detective work on your part. The key to the solution will often lie hidden in the information gathered in the interview. Ideally, taking a history should be Ideally, taking a history should be a warm human encounter rather than a mechanical process in which the therapist sits with a pen, poised, reading questions and taking down answers. You should develop an ability to hold a relaxed conversation interview while keeping the mental checklist of important areas to cover in the beginning of your practice. Something tells me that once you have done a client assessment a few times, you'll be much more comfortable with knowing what you need to ask, and you'll be able to have a more presentable demeanor when you speak to people. While we were in school, we actually weren't allowed to keep any kind of written record on our clients, so I had to do all of my clients through memory, and which was very difficult. I'm not gonna lie, I kept some notes on some of them because there was no way I could remember everything that I felt throughout our session and everything that we talked about throughout the entire time that I was in school. I did over 225 massages while I was in school, and I also did several massages for my parents while I was in school as well. So I did a lot of massages. But one of the key things that I would start out with would just be to do a simple assessment, find out if they are taking any kind of medications, and that includes vitamins. If someone's taking a vitamin for iron, low iron, somebody feels like they have low iron, that is also a good indicator that they get cold pretty easily. So these are really good things to know if you think about it, to know every little thing that they have taken, as versus just focusing on the fact of if they've taken a muscle relaxer or not, which, as you know, is contraindicated. You shouldn't massage with muscle relaxers. Anyway, moving on. Sorry, I might do this a lot, and I apologize for, I'm not exactly a fast reader, because it takes me a minute to process everything. Again, that whole dyslexia thing doesn't really help me with reading either, so I'll do the best I can, and if you get bored with me, you know, you can always pause and come back. Anyway, so moving on, and I already showed you these little pictures of the information form and the bodies. Alright. Oh, here you go. So some things that you can ask is, what brought you here? Where do you hurt? What doesn't work right? Or what do you feel doesn't work right? How long has it been not working? When did it start? Because if it's a prolonged thing, you could be looking at, you know, an old injury that's healed up, and that requires a little bit more work. If the pain is the result of a specific injury, exactly how did the injury occur? What physical position were you in when the injury occurred, and what is the course of the rest of the day and how the next couple of days went? Describe the pain, swelling, limitation, and motion, and treatment, including self-treatment that occurred over the course of the rest of the day, as well as the days following the injury. So you can find out what all they did to help themselves before, ultimately, if they needed to go see a primary care, then you can find out what they did. Have you ever had this problem before? If so, then when and under what circumstances, and when was the first time? When is the pain worse? When is it better? What makes the pain worse, and what makes it better? In what physical position does it feel worst and best? And whom else have you consulted? What did they say or do? Health history questions you can ask. How is your general health? Have you had any recent illnesses, injuries, or surgeries? Have you had any major illnesses, injuries, or neurological problems? Do you have a history of heart problems? Is there a history in your family of brain or neurological disorders such as stroke? Are you under a doctor's care for a condition? If so, what condition? What, if any, are you taking medications? Who are your regular caregivers? And do you see a chiropractor, osteopath, naturopath, there we go, or any other sort of physician? Any other kind of a health professional? Sorry, I need coffee. I don't do anything without coffee. Okay, athletic history. Do you play any sports, workout, or have you ever? As a child or teenager, did you take dance, and were you a cheerleader? And what were your activities? For personal, family, and social history questions you can ask. Are you married, single, or do you have any children? Describe any recent stressors in your home environment. And what do you do for recreation, and what are your primary sources of stress? Occupational history. What is your occupation? What does it involve? What do you do all day? How much do you sit, stand, or move about? Is there any heavy lifting, repetitive motion, or does any work activity cause pain? How often do you take breaks, and for how long? What do you do during tasks, and what types of work have you done in the past? Have you ever had any work-related injuries? Which might be why some people ask, have you ever received an employee, what is that? Compensation? Workers' comp, there we go. So you can use these as a checklist of things you can ask for your clients. Whole body assessment. Let me just skim this real fast. Okay. Most of our clientele is accustomed to thinking in terms of traditional medical practices. If they present with a specific injury, then they expect the examination and treatment to focus on the injury and its immediate surrounding area. In many cases, this expectation may be appropriate. It is certainly possible to suffer from an isolated injury at a precise site, and it can be specifically treated. In most cases, however, a broader approach is needed. Most myofascial pain or dysfunction results from alignment problems or long duration of most local injuries. If left untreated, it will usually affect other parts of the body for this reason. It usually is appropriate and desirable to evaluate the alignment of the body as a whole before initiating treatment. Some clients will refuse such an evaluation and insist on strictly local treatment. The need for informed consent requires that therapists share their assessment of the problems with the client and propose a course of examination and treatment, including possible alternatives. One of the alternatives is, of course, palliative treatment. As long as therapists are honest with their clients about what they believe is wrong and what they believe to be an ideal course of action, it is appropriate to work with such clients to alleviate their symptoms. On a short-term basis, for such clients, the therapist may perform a more abbreviated interview, confined largely to the circumstances that seem relevant to the chief complaint, and then skip directly to examination of the area of the presenting problem. For those clients, however, who agree to pursue a whole-body approach, an examination of body alignment can be crucial for forming the clinical picture. The extent of such an examination can vary according to the skills and judgment of the therapist and the specific situation. A description of the basic requirements for an assessment is presented in the following sections. Informal observation. An informal observation is a first step in a whole body assessment. The therapist observes the client carefully and beginning with the first encounter in the walking area. How does the client sit, stand, or walk? Sit down again in the treatment room, and the clinical massage therapist should cultivate this observational habit, which can easily be practiced in any public space. When I was in school and I would be going to pick up, coming to get my next client, I would walk in and I would see how they're sitting. I would see if their legs are crossed. I would see if they're, if they're meditating, if they're sitting up straight. I would see if, if they're holding their head or, if there's anything that I can kind of pick up on. And then I would actually guide them by showing them the way with my hand and gesturing for them to go first, because it's really nice to allow someone to go before you, but it's also nice to be able to follow them. You want to watch how they walk. You want to watch their gait. You want to see if they're walking with a flat-footed step on one side and other things. Of course, you may have already gone through this or this, but just in case you haven't, that is definitely something I started doing because for that reason, and also because we didn't have any formal SIP notes that we practiced on. So that was my own initial assessment, and then I would use the 5 or 10 minutes as a verbal interview while we were in the room, to allow them to tell me what all is going on. And sometimes they wouldn't say nothing. They would be like, I got nothing going on. I just want to rest, So at that point in time, just basic relaxation, is generally sufficient. But anyway, moving on. Formal alignment examination. Oh, and I'm sorry. I always play music in the background whenever I study or really do anything, because it keeps me calm. It helps me. I also have some crystals and rocks and a few other things that I have no idea if they really work or not, but it seems to keep me at peace. So anyway, if I hope the music in the background doesn't bother you guys. I should have mentioned that earlier, but I didn't. Okay, photographs. Many therapists take photographs of clients as part of a complete alignment and examination. Advantages of this practice include the client is able to see what the therapist sees. That is really good. You definitely do want to do that. The therapist has access to the photographs and absent of the client for treatment planning purposes. It's nice to be able to show your clients what you're talking about. And if you could, and some people, they're just not going to get it. They don't care. Just fix it. And then others want to know, and they're appreciative of the fact of you being able to explain, well, this part of your body hurts, so if I start here, because it's all connected, if I start here, then it'll work its way up, and it'll hopefully alleviate the pain, the initial pain in that specific areas versus just attacking that specific area, like the lower back or something. You may want to work on hamstrings. You may want to work on the calves a little bit. But anyway, we'll move on. If the therapist has a computer, then photographs can be scanned in or taken initially with a digital camera. And lines or grids can be drawn to help analyze deviations. Copies can be printed for the client, and photographs can be taken before and after treatment to provide document of changes. The documentation of changes, I don't know if it would be that immediate, nor do I think that it would be wise to set the expectation for it for your own personal curiosity.